All right, so your API actually is working. If I press F12, what you have in the code is basically taking the response that you get from NASA and writing it to the log. And that is precisely what it's doing. And this is a JSON file. So what you're going to have to do is process the file. And you'll notice it's an array of 4. And I think what's a little confusing about this is that you may think, okay, I can just go in and try to access this picture. Okay, well, this picture is nothing. So when I copied this and I paste it up here, it's file not found. Okay, so that's actually not the photo that was retrieved. If I click on the arrow, this is the information that you want to access. And you'll notice that camera and rover are objects. So in your code, you're referring to everything returned as response. Okay, so in order to access anything, you have to say response dot, and then you're going to have to subscript into photos. So it's going to be response dot photos sub 0, sub 1, sub 2. What I noticed when I looked at this image, because this is actually the real picture, is that there's a lot of duplicate photos in this API. So when I went and looked at the other photos, two of them are identical. So you're really only getting 2 different photos. So what I would do with this is I would just display information from the first thing in the array. That simplifies your code. You don't have to have any kind of a for loop. So all you have to do is response.photos sub 0 dot camera, and then anything that you see here by camera, it's just dot full name dot name, and that will give you the data that you see here. Okay. If you want to access the Earth date, it's just response.photo sub 0 dot Earth date. If you want to get this link, it is response.photo sub 0 dot image source. Okay, here's rover, which is an object. So if we wanted to get the name, it would be response.photo sub 0 dot rover dot name. So I did put together a little example. Okay, and this is basically your code that I added to. So in order to display it in the page, I would actually get rid of this part, the copyright thing, and I would just set up like a little container here to hold the content that you're going to format. So I just gave it an ID of content. Okay, then, and let's see, I would probably, I don't know if I would do a little different styling on this, because once you see it, you'll notice that the styling needs to be adjusted. But I did create a little variable called content, set it to blanks, and then you'll notice that I'm adding to it, and I'm adding both the HTML and the text that I want to display. So I'm doing both. So I've got a heading, and I've got a little label called rover name and camera. So that tells you that I'm going to be accessing the name of the rover here, and I also wanted the full name of the camera. So to get the name of the rover, it is response.photo sub 0 dot rover dot name. And then if we look in the code, that is what you see, response.photo sub 0 dot rover dot name. So that is going to retrieve Curiosity and display it right here. Okay, then I wanted Curiosity slash and then the name of the camera. So you'll notice I have the slash as a string, and then I'm adding in the name of the camera. So it's response.photosubzero.camera.fullname. So response is all of this, .photosubzero.camera.fullname. So it's going to retrieve this and display it on the page. Then, instead of displaying a link to the image, I kind of figured you'd want to show the image itself. So you have to start formatting an image tag, because what they're giving you here is the URL. Okay, and this URL actually does work, this one up here. Okay, so you can copy it, paste it, but this is what it looks like. So that is a working URL. The ones that are on the array lines themselves here, these are not working URLs. Okay, you got to dig in to actually get the picture that is real and not bogus. So in the code, you have to put together your image tag. So you have to kind of visualize what that tag looks like. So I've got image source equal, and then normally in double quotes, we put the URL. So because this is already in double quotes, I had to put a single quote here. So I've got image source equal quote. So after the quote is where the URL goes. So that's why I add in response.photosubzero.imageSource. Okay. Response.photosubzero image source. It's going to put this URL in that location. Okay, so right now I've got image source equal single quote. I've got the URL. I need to add in the closing quote for the URL. And then it definitely needed to be styled. So I added styling. And again, because this is inside double quotes, I had to use a single quote here. Float right with 200px. This is my closing single quote. This is my closing angle bracket for my image tag. And then I have a double quote because this is all considered, whoops, do not want to move that. This is all considered to be a string. Okay, so that's how I formatted the actual image tag to get the image to show in the page. And then I just added a couple additional pieces of information, the date and the landing date. And I have, they're in paragraphs, as you can see. And then I just grabbed the information that was returned from NASA. Okay, and there's a lot of information actually that you can access here. Okay, so camera, I mean, you've got a shortened name, you have an ID for a rover. For the rover itself, you have landing date, launch date, name, whether it's active or inactive. So there's quite a bit of information there that you can access and display. Okay, I just chose to do a couple, but if you wanted to do more, it's basically the same process. Okay, and once you have all of the content added to the content variable, then you've got to update your page. And because this isn't using jQuery, I am updating the content ID with HTML because it's HTML and text, and the variable that contains everything is content. Okay, so this is where all of that is going to go. Okay, so if we pull that up, and I'm going to pause this just for a second while I display it. Okay, you can see that we've got rover name and camera, Curiosity front hazard avoidance camera. It's got the date and the landing date and the picture. Now, if I wanted to do something like this for every single picture, and I wouldn't in this case because the pictures are the same. And so you're only going to get 2 different photos. You could put this into a loop. okay, because you've got the length of the array here. And so if you were going to loop this, you would just do for, let's see, have a subscript set. So you'd be doing this while your subscript is less than the length of photos, which is your array. And then this would all be part of the loop. Okay, and if I was going to do this, I would probably like throw in an HR. And I might even make that picture smaller, just because I don't have enough content to display next to it. And then instead of subscripting in with a 0, I would have to use X. And then if I save this and I reload this, it should display it all. And here it is. Yeah, and I would probably move where that image is, but like I said, you'll notice that the pictures are the same. We've only got really 2 different pictures, and that's just because of the way the API is returning the information. So I actually would not put this in a loop. I would probably comment this out. Or actually just zap it. There we go. So hopefully this will help you format your pages. And let me know if you still run into trouble.